The aim of Black Mental Matters is to tell experiences with honesty. Therefore, some discussions may trigger an adverse reaction. If a discussion is beginning to upset you, we advise that you please stop listening and talk to your support team.
It's Black Mental Matters with Vince and Makeba. How you doing, Makeba?
I'm doing pretty good, Vince. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. It's great to be back with you again. And
you too.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Miss Makeba, let me see, masters of, social work, right? Bachelor's in social work.
Yeah, bachelor's in social work. Master of Public Administration and Public Health.
So she got all the letters and credentials and the research and everything. And again, I'm so privileged to be able to glean all this great stuff from you. And we got some problems we got to talk about today.
We do, Vince.
We got some problems. You know, you and I both are parents. Children, and as parents, you have to be ready to deal with some issues with your children, and that includes if they have some mental health challenges.
Right.
It's important. We got to step up when things get serious. And studies showing 12.8% of U.S. adolescents had at least one major depressive episode. That's what the studies are telling us.
Yeah, and what's of major concern with that, Vince, is those numbers are underrepresenting Black people because we don't seek treatment. So that percentage that is out there, it's actually a lot lower than the real data because we are just not talking about it.
And when you said, I could see a big number too, because I know just in casual discussions with the fellas, and you start telling them about what you're dealing with your son, and then when they finish, you go home and hug your son because his kid got some problems. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, all right. So our child, well, how do we even begin to recognize that this, there may be some mental health challenges for our kids?
Right. Well, I think we always need to make sure that we're understanding that whenever we're talking about mental health, that we understand that there is a problem with the general population. But of course, then with African Americans or Black Americans, that there's that other underlying layer, that added layer that we need to look at. Blacks are 20% more likely to experience mental health problems than the general population. So this is a really big problem.
20%.
20%. The four common mental health disorders among Blacks, particularly youth, are major depressive disorder or major depression, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, which many of us know that just from hearing stories about war, that's any type of trauma, and that's child sexual abuse, being in a household where there's a lot of yelling and screaming, all types of things can cause trauma that ends up being unresolved, and then your body and your mind are trying to process it later on. ADHD, which is what used to be called as hyperactivity with kids. That's very important, especially with Black kids, because a lot of Black kids are misdiagnosed as being behavior disorder.
And especially boys too.
Exactly.
Boys, we trying to get busy. We feeling ourselves, hormones is going.
And also Black girls. Black girls because of that perception of the strong Black woman and that you're not supposed to show your vulnerability, and being soft is being weak. And then of course among Black kids, a major concern is suicide or death by suicide. So this is something very serious that parents need to be aware of.
And so the signs that you would see, I had a low self-esteem.
Right.
And they have low self-esteem.
Right. Disinterest in hobbies that used to bring them joy. Changes in eating behaviors, weight gain or weight loss. Also, children that used to have maybe a friend group or used to be very social now are more withdrawn. What I do want to point out to parents is to not confuse a withdrawn child with an introverted child, because that's a completely different set of circumstances. An introverted child is just a child that's just naturally more quiet by
Okay.
design, and they're just more internalized than they are externalized. And that's
Okay.
actually nothing wrong with that. The issue with Black America is that we feel like, we need to push our kids to always represent themselves, speak up, make eye contact, be aggressive. And there are some kids that just don't have that personality, and that's fine. So we need to make sure that we're not pushing our kids, because that actually will lead them to experience anxiety.
And you know what? I think not the rationale, but the proof in that pudding, as adults, I've worked in media. There's jobs like master control operator, where that person is pretty much isolated. They just sit there and just watch screens all day.
Wow.
When I would interview for people like that, you were looking for that person that was very quiet,
Yes.
introverted, not a social butterfly.
Right.
He's going to be on the job, and I
Yes.
ain't got to worry about him, in the break room all the time and that kind of thing.
Right.
Or, just the opposite. So those personality traits, those are... wow. And so don't get them mixed up.
Right. Yeah. Don't get them mixed up. And also don't think that just because your child is quiet, that they are depressed, because that's not the same thing. And there are actually now some social groups and some online groups, especially for Black girls, to address the fact that there are some Black girls that like to play video games, that like to do more activities that involve just them being by themselves, and that there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually healthy if that's their personality.
And I know this is something that you have a lot of interest in, have provided a lot of help for, say in the LGBTQ, but not necessarily LGBTQ. There are some boys who are manly but still like playing with dolls.
Right.
And there are some girls who are very feminine, but they can knock the ball out the ballpark.
Right.
And that's another way you can get
Exactly.
it mixed up.
Right.
Huh?
And that's going into that's a whole nother episode
whole
right
nother
there.
episode, yes.
Is Black parents giving their children space to be themselves, and not to be so caught up on those gender norms, and just allowing their child just to be who they are.
Another one, academic. You see their grades go down.
Absolutely.
That's a big sign, right?
Yes, grades going down, lack of sleep, or changes in sleep patterns, which is you got to be really paying attention to your child to catch that, because most kids go to bed after their parents and are just up when they're supposed to go to school, whether they're tired or not. So you need to really be kind of paying attention to when your child, especially a young child, is going to sleep at night. And especially if they're having to get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to get to school. That means they're not getting enough rest.
And that's becoming a lot more common these days. You get out there, you see kids on the, sitting on the corner waiting on the school bus and stuff like that. So
In the dark, yeah.
In the dark. So there are definitely some of the signs. It could be one or a combination of these things that we're talking about. But as a parent, you want to do the best that you can to help them. And so if you can catch it early,
Right.
there's definitely can be a good outcome, right?
And part of catching that, Vince, is in your dialogue with your child. What I learned as a parent was when I would pick my kids up from school, and I would ask them, "How was your day?" I always got fine, and then what do you mean fine? What did you do? Well, that's too broad of a question to ask a child. You need to ask children specifics on, where'd you sit during lunch? What happened in this class? How are you feeling today? Ask them about things that are going on in the news that they know about. Just to start a dialogue on where they are right now with their emotions.
That's it right there. And so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Makeba, you jumped the gun on me.
I'm
I want
sorry.
to know, how do you dig it out? You are already telling folks, but she got a whole lot more to tell.
What?
So you keep it right there. We'll take just a small pause. We'll be right back with Black Mental Matters. Black Mental Matters with Vince and Makeba, and today we're talking about our young people, Makeba, and the fact that, would you say 20%, probably more like 30-40% of our young folks, especially in the Black community, particularly in the Black community, are experiencing some mental health challenges.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I misspoke on that. We're Blacks are 20 times
more
likely to
likely
experience mental illness than other people in the general population.
Okay, so
Yes.
yeah, let me clear that up.
That's a high number.
That it's still a high number.
Right.
It's a very high number.
Exactly.
And as you say, since we don't talk about it, we don't report it, it's still kind of a mystery as to what that number is.
Right.
But what we do know is not a mystery are some of the things that can contribute to our young children, our kids, having some mental health challenges. What are some of those things?
Well, from a socio-economic perspective, it's violence. Black kids have a higher likelihood of being exposed to violence than other children. And that can lead to all types of problems with the internalization of that. That can lead to PTSD.
Yes.
That can lead to, them acting out and, doing harm on somebody else, and now they're in trouble with the law. Then that's another set of problems. So that's big. Also,
Before you leave that, I got it, because it was really the thing that really made me start thinking about this subject matter as it relates to the Black community. A lot of my family's from New Orleans, and when Katrina hit, and you had just devastation and bodies floating down the street, and the kids was on the bridge, and they was put into the Superdome, and they were saying, "Help me, help me, help me," and nobody came to help them. But then not only that, nobody came to help those kids process that.
Yeah.
How many it
Right.
was. And I was like, well, who, those kids, when you talk about bringing in some counselors,
absolutely.
those kids needed some counselors.
Absolutely. That actually gave me a chill. During that time, we had some kids come from New Orleans to Atlanta
Big
that were
time.
in my son's class, and one little boy drew for an art project, drew a picture. I think he was in the second or third grade. He drew a picture of coffins floating down the river, and when he presented that to his teacher, the teacher kind of figured out, okay, well, this is probably an experience that he had before he came over to Atlanta, but then there was no follow-up with the social worker,
Right.
no counseling. So you just gave a really good example, Vince, of the unprocessed or even unaddressed trauma that Black people have collectively experienced that has not been addressed.
Right. Okay. All right. You
Wow,
took me back
gave me
there.
a chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some other things, of course, that contribute to our young people. What are some of those things?
So, of course, 24-hour access to social media, that's big. Once a child has a phone, they are connected to the world 24 hours a day, and they have access to their friend group and beyond, and vice versa.
The enemy group too.
Exactly, right.
The
And that's a big
bullies,
deal
yeah.
for kids.
That's right.
Right, and then from there, the bullying, the extensive bullying that goes on. I actually saw, this was really interesting. I saw a video of, it was actually Shark Tank, and it was an episode, long story short, of a Black mom and her son who developed this cookie company, got this great deal with Damon, and later on found out, once her son actually got the deal, he was about 11, 12 years old. He was being extensively bullied online, getting called the N-word. I mean, just all types of stuff that, 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have to deal with this with our kids. And the mom had to shut down business and just address her son being attacked online.
Wow.
Yeah, and it only came about because he became
Successful.
popular and successful through that media outlet.
Isn't that, the whole thing about dumbing down,
Right.
comes into play with that too.
Yes.
Kids acting like they're not smart because that's not cool.
Right.
Or because if I do act smart, I become a target.
Yes, right, exactly. So shout out to all the Black nerds that are out there.
right.
Those are my people.
Yes.
But we do need to get away from and start having conversations with our kids about, letting other kids be themselves and not having to conform to this one ideal of what a cool Black person looks like.
Right.
With
Good.
thinking that you got to be, into one type of music only, or if you don't listen to this, you're not cool. So
Right.
kids do have to deal with that, unfortunately. Of course, also we have the racial inequalities, not just within the school system, but just in
life.
general.
In life,
Kids who do have access to social media also have access to the news, unfortunately, with the racial injustice, police shootings, police brutality against young persons of color, and that news cycle, just like the news cycles on the television, Vince, that's 24 hours a day. And so you have access to just being re-traumatized over and over again.
Over and over again. Yeah.
Yes. And then lastly, one of the most important things that Black kids face is the stigma within the family. So a lot of kids don't get the help because once they even do try to say, hey, I'm feeling depressed. No, you're not. What do you mean? You got lights, you got
lights.
clothes.
You talked about that before.
Right.
Man up. What's wrong
Exactly.
with you, boy? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You ain't got it as hard as I had it. And-
Right. Yeah. So those are just some issues that our kids have to face that are leading over into mental health issues with them, particularly with depression and anxiety.
So our once we determine that, okay, some of these things have happened, of course, we always want to get to solutions. And I think we can start, right now talking about that. And you teased them in the last segment. First thing as a parent we need to do is start talking to them, right? Have some
Absolutely,
dialogue.
Vince. Start talking to your child, and once you do have an understanding that your child is experiencing a problem, especially with depression, thoughts of suicide, thoughts of hopelessness, not wanting to be here anymore, you have got to get professional help. And I want to really stress this point with parents is that if you have a child that is dealing with depression, you come across a journal or something, or you see where they are communicating that they are having thoughts where they are entertaining suicide or death by suicide, you cannot deal with that on your own. And when you think about depression, you can't think about treating depression the same way you would treat a cold. You have to look at depression as this dark force, or even this thing that's likened to a hitman that is trying to take your child out.
Wow.
And you have to be very aggressive in your response to that. Number one, you need to make sure that you reach out to a professional.
Okay.
Your child needs to see a professional as soon as possible. And then you need to stay on top of their treatment or their care, because you cannot take this lightly. It has to be addressed very seriously and with some aggression. And a lot of times parents, and this is another important point that I wanted to make, because I've had to learn this myself, is that you've got to know when to take off your parenting hat and to be an advocate and an ally for your child who is experiencing this, and not worry so much about they didn't press their clothes this morning, they didn't clean their room. You've got to kind of put away that parenting stuff and that relationship that you have with them, parent to child, with understanding that they need help, and understanding, well, are they making their counseling sessions? Are they taking their medication? Are they feeling better? Those are the things that you got to put ahead of you parenting them and you being a mom.
So you not only, of course, we always use the word support,
Right.
but you got to be in it.
You do. You have to be their
you can't
advocate.
Just drop them off at the doctor's office and hey, I'll be back.
Right,
I'm going
because
to the mall, kind of thing.
No,
You
right,
need to be in there too.
absolutely,
Yeah.
right. And you need to, if your child does need to have therapy, you need to be present
Yes.
and engaged with the therapist. Of course, the confidentiality that's going to be there between that therapist and your child, that exists, but you need to at least show your child that you are in this with them, and have a conversation with that therapist and ask, what is it I can do to help support my child? on their emotional wellness journey. And then you need to do those things.
That's good stuff, Makeba. That's good stuff. And so, come on, let's be honest, everyone, with ourselves. And you know your daughter, your son, and how they are, and then how they're not anymore, or vice versa, what have you. And so these are just some great information on how we can really support them so that they have the best mental health outcome that's possible. And when we come back, there's some things, in addition to getting the therapist, there's some things that you all can do to help them along in this journey. And we'll talk about that when we come back.
Okay, great.
Black Mental Matters.
The aim of Black Mental Matters is to tell experiences with honesty. Therefore, some discussions may trigger an adverse reaction. If a discussion is beginning to upset you, we advise that you please stop listening and talk to your support team.
It's Black Mental Matters with Vince and Makeba, and today we are helping our parents out there when you're parenting your children that are battling with some mental health issues. And as we found out, again, through research and everything, that it's happening more often, than we'd want it to. Mm-hmm. And there's still questions out there. But there are some things, Makeba, that, and I'm encouraged as we do this research, when you find, okay, there are some answers.
Right.
That's the beginning. It's just start looking for,
right.
what's really going on. Mm-hmm. One of the things, of course, your child needs your emotional support. Mm-hmm. You need to be their number one person.
Absolutely.
They need somebody to talk to. It can't be, sometimes it ain't their friends.
No, yeah, your friends aren't your therapists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and adults need to understand that too, and parents need to also understand, as they are assisting their child in their mental health journey, that they need to be able to unload as a parent and have somewhere and someplace and somebody that they can talk to, so that they have enough openness to always be available for their child, where they don't get burnt out.
Yeah, that's true. So spending quality time with your child,
Right.
very effective way,
Yes.
right? Spending quality time. You started talking about this. Encourage open and honest conversations.
Yes.
How are you feeling about stuff? Biggest thing, and I know I'm going too fast right now, but
okay.
a biggest thing is listening to what they got to say.
Vince, 2 ears, 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you speak, especially when it comes to children. And we as parents need to practice listening with no intention of responding. Just shut up and listen.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do as a parent, because you're thinking, well, I don't know about that, and I don't understand, and why didn't you do this, and how come this? You have to just listen without sitting there thinking about what you're going to say next.
And Dad always wants to fix things.
Yeah.
You know how that works. He wants to fix things. So we want to get rid of the problem as soon as we can. Mm-hmm. So that one more with that is acknowledging their inner struggles. Say, hey, acknowledge. Okay, I understand what you're going through,
Right.
or I can
And
empathize.
affirming it, and not minimalizing it because it's important to them.
Yeah.
So it might be something small to us, but it might be big to them.
Yes. Another big thing is encouraging a healthy lifestyle, Makeba. This is big for helping our kids have better mental, just like for adults, kids need, so that means stuff like exercising regularly, huh?
Right, yes. Regular exercise, eating healthfully. So you're trying to counter and combat some of that junk food, which is a double-edged sword sometimes, because sometimes kids want the junk food, or parents will get kids the junk food because it makes them feel better. So we have to really be conscious of that. Also, if you're dealing with a child that's also got a weight issue, you cannot be a nagging parent.
Right.
Because then you're exacerbating the problem, and you're making it worse. That's going to make them want to eat for comfort even more. So just in how, and you just mentioned this, Vince, a little bit, with how we interact and communicate with our children that are struggling with their mental health, is we cannot nag. It has to be supportive, and it has to be loving, and it has to be unconditional. And this is something else I wanted to stress during this podcast, Vince, is that we need to, as parents, make sure that when we express love for our kids, it's not because they did something or they brought home a grade or they accomplished something. That love should be unconditional, just because they're here.
Right. Ooh, Kiba,
Yeah.
something else. Sleep. I didn't realize how much sleep affects the mental health, especially when they're developing. You know, and
Yes.
you develop
Brain
until you like
development.
20 something. So you need to get some regular sleep so that
Absolutely.
you can be top of mind and all that kind
And
of stuff.
that's parents too. Actually, sleep is the cornerstone of mental health. If you don't get enough sleep, it's hard, even as an adult during your day, to figure out how to catch up with the day. You just feel tired and exhausted and lethargic. Your mind is not processing things the way that it should. You feel hungry when you're actually tired. You've got all these mixed emotions. So sleep is very important for kids. And at least with kids, parents can control that a little bit more
Right.
with saying, hey, let's get these devices out of your room.
Right.
Let's have some tea together. You need to establish a nighttime ritual with your child.
Right, right. I like this next one too, and that is help them feel connected because loneliness, folks, is a tough thing. And when you're lonely as a kid under 18 years old, that's what they say the devil's playground. You get to your own
Absolutely.
devices. So helping them socialize somehow. You can inspire them to join a club, maybe. Give them some ideas on attending various social events. I think those things like I used to laugh. And did you do a cotillion, batillion? Was you all dressed up back in the day?
No.
You did.
I don't even know what that is. What is that?
A cotillion.
A cotillion?
Yeah, or a botillion for the girls. It was the cotillion.
You're fancy.
Well, no,
I didn't do all
wasn't
that.
fancy, but I saw them, all the time doing that. But it helped get them. It was like announcing them to society, kind of.
okay. I see
The
where you're
Jack
going.
and
Yeah,
Jilly
you're
kind of people.
fancy.
No.
I didn't do that.
but that helped them,
Absolutely.
kind of develop as young
Right.
people and socialize, encouraging. Now, you hear it all the time, play dates. And I mean about play dates. They're in the second grade. I'm like,
Right.
what's that all about? But things like that that helps the young people become social and learn how to process conflict. I mean, all those things come up on those times,
Right.
and that's how you're
You're
able to
absolutely right.
understand it.
Yes, and you touched on loneliness. I think 80% of kids that are dealing with depression and anxiety experience loneliness, and loneliness does not go away by itself.
Wow.
So it is something that you need to make sure that you are addressing with your child if they're by themselves a lot. And again, that's not the same as being introverted. That's not the same thing. If they are by themselves and you're noticing those other circumstances where they're not eating or changes in their behavior, changes in their grades, you need to make sure that you're giving that child some type of support. And that might even be you sitting and playing a video game with them. That may be all they want.
Yeah, and that could be a good time for you too. It's like whatever it is that makes your child stay in contact with others, which includes you, because when this situation arises where they have mental health, then they don't want to deal with you either.
Right.
So at least be that
Right.
beginning.
Yes.
And maybe do some role playing kind of thing. That's when this happens, because like what you say, loneliness, it don't go away by
doesn't
itself.
go away
Even
by
though it's
itself.
lonely, it ain't going
No.
nowhere by itself. I was like, well, that's pretty good. Yeah.
That's a good one. Right. And also, Vince, I wanted to also point out the importance of when you're dealing with your child's mental health, you need to make sure home is a refuge.
Right.
So the house, you cannot be arguing with your spouse. You can't be arguing with, your other kids about what's going on. You need to be very conscientious of the vibrational frequency of your home. Your home should be a safe space for your child and not a place where they're talking to you about their depression and then they're hearing their parents scream and fight all night long.
And you've talked about that before, and that's how I know it's true, because you say sometimes, it comes up in all these different scenarios.
Right.
There are some solutions to these things.
Absolutely.
And that's why, again, Makeba, I'm so glad, that me and everybody else, we getting this help from none other than M. JRBMO. She got all them letters. This girl is bad. I'm telling to the bone, ladies and gentlemen. And you can overcome mental health challenges along with your child.
Absolutely.
And so we really appreciate it again, Makeba, for all the information. Any last words you want to tell them and leave them with?
Well, just to understand the importance that you are your child's role model and that they're watching you and they're also watching your behavior. So if you're telling them one thing and then you're doing something else, they are learning the way that you are dealing with the stress and the problems in your life as well. So you need to be very conscious of your own behavior.
Wow, that sounds like a Makeba mental moment right there.
Oh man,
dang,
it does.
You gotta think about it, girl. All right. Well, hey, let's see. BlackMentalMatters.com, new website. It's looking good. We're working on it. Info at Black Mental Matters. You can email us, the Instagram, the Twitter, all that kind of stuff. Stay in touch and let's move this together. Advocate with us right here. It's Black Mental Matters.